Hello, welcome to our presentation. Here's Kevin Barry,
Hello.
and I'm Eduardo Pineda Alfaro. And we're going to be covering today debt and blended finance as the bridge to realize the immense value of space. So first of all, the premises of the technical session and the roadmap. First of all, is that space is valuable, extremely valuable, but it is hard to reach. Finance is that bridge that we need in order to unleash the potential of the space. And blended finance is a catalyst or a tool to make the finance more favorable, especially for a sector that needs to be developed. Kevin will cover first the value.
So right now, the lion's share of the space sector, at about $400 billion a year, is in communication, remote sensing, scientific observation, and to some extent in access to space. As the space economy continues to mature, we already have plans for extraction on the moon and asteroids, as well as contracts both on and off of planetary bodies. Ultimately, the space economy is headed in the direction of having enterprise and trade, which is a sign of a mature economy, and the existential benefit of expanding out into space. As Elon has wanted to mention, we need to make life multiplanetary. Life is extremely rare, if not unique, to the surface of Earth, and it isn't good practice to keep all your eggs in one basket.
Now that we have seen what is the value of space, now we're going to see how finance is unleashing that potential. So first of all, understanding what is the difference between finance and value. Value basically is generated from resources and activities. So if it would be a bonfire, the value would be generated from the wood. Finance, on the other hand, is not creating any value, but it's accelerating. So if you're blowing oxygen into the bonfire, you're accelerating just the combustion. Another way also to see finance is from a time perspective. In finance, you are borrowing money against the future in order to build something today. So basically, if you have a river and you're building a bridge, you're generating additional value by creating this bridge, and this value has to be, in order to make this stable, bigger than the cost of the bridge and the reflection, which is the interest onto building this bridge. More finance concepts is first the credit. So the credit is a big part of the economy. In the US economy, for instance, for every $6 of cash or cash equivalents, there are $85 of credit. And all of this is generating the whole wealth of the US economy. Very important concept, and because we're in a technical session, we will go with a physics example. Position, the first derivative velocity, second derivative acceleration. So if the position would be the wealth, how fast the money is moving between hands is the velocity of the money. And then investment is basically how much extra money you're bringing in. This is increasing the speed of those movement of money, which is having an exponential growth in the wealth. Just to say also that acceleration could be positive or negative. If you're able to repay the loan, then it's positive. But if for some reason you start default into your loans, then this will go to a deceleration and eventually will generate a crash in the economy. Now that we have established the most important finance concept, finance has had a big impact across history, especially during the dark ages when the church outlawed lending. It was only when the lending was restored, it led to the renaissance of Europe. Another good example happened when JP Morgan financed the Transcontinental Railroad and many other railroads. They made enough money to fund the reconstruction of Europe through the Marshall Plan after the Second World War. And more recently, the laser-focused priority onto finance of climate projects and renewable energy has boosted the investment in renewable energy to $300 billion per year. And this is accelerating the energy transition that we all need.
The massive financial field, which Eduardo has been discussing, is part of the over $200,000 billion annual accounts under management around the world. Of that massive pool of investment, the US venture capital market only represents a small 50 billion of this entire market. And of that, while it's been rising dramatically, as shown on the left here, the venture capital investment in space represents only 5 billion, or 10% of just the venture capital market. In order to make the transition into space, we're going to need to make the transition into the larger financial market. Venture capital itself, while well-suited to startups and small ventures, is ill-suited to the future ambitions we have in space. This is because it has an exceptional high capital cost, a strong failure rate because of the high risk of its ventures, and low resilience to problems or delays in creation, largely because of their dependence on having a quick turnaround of about 5 to 7 years for most venture capital projects. In the example of building something like space solar power, Each of these three sectors, government, banks, and investors, struggle to find a rational economic argument to build it. Governments have limited equity and cannot afford something as grand as space solar power at scale. Investors struggle to make this argument work because of their high cost of capital and demand for high returns to give out money. And banks are too risk adverse to take on this project alone. However, using blended finance, we're not only able to address these concerns, but also achieve the goals that all three groups have of maximizing impact, returns, and investments respectively. This is because of an interesting economic balance in what happens with the capital stack. If you consider a given project that was done with standard finance or blended finance, you'll find that in either a loss or a gain, all three parties benefit from using blended finance. In a loss scenario, banks end up with a larger risk cushion before they have any losses and are thus more assured of getting their returns. Investors have a better chance of salvaging some of their equity from the project, and the government, while it lost this position, was willing to pay that because it has a much outsized impact represented by the red valuation bar. This is even more true in the case of a project gain, because the government is having a massive outsized impact for all that they were willing to spend. The bank has yet a larger cushion protecting their investment, and the investor equity has been able to grow substantially, usually more than it could using standard finance alone. This has already garnered a lot of traction around the world, particularly in international economic development. The IFC, a subset of the World Bank Group, has invested $160 billion for the next 15 months in global development projects. Some of these projects, done by other companies as well, include agriculture, education, housing, and climate change adaptation. The Chinese have also begun to use blended finance in order to fund utility-scale energy efficiency plans. Through this program, for every $1 million the Chinese spend, they get a 45 to 50 times indirect leverage effect on the market. The Indian Solar Development Program is arguably even more effective, leveraging almost $292 billion in potential investment towards 175 gigawatts of solar development. Through foreign exchange hedging, they've been able to achieve a 9 times direct leverage in their market alone. In order to achieve the grand ambitions that Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan Chase have shown for the future of space, reaching about $3 trillion in 2040, or about the size of the oil and gas sector today, we will need to engage debt and equity markets to progress with space development. Government can entice and encourage these markets through the use of blended finance. We hope you've enjoyed our presentation.
And if you want to join the conversation or join efforts on the development of the space economy and especially space infrastructure, please join us on Lightbridge, or even better, come to Dubai. See you there. Bye.
Bye.